Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest episode of our entertainment show. As you know, we've been previewing and airing live on air about our special documentary. In terms of, we've done two animated series in terms of fighting games documentaries in the past. We spoke about Street Fighter in terms of Capcom game. We spoke about Mortal Kombat in terms of NetherRealm. Our Mortal Kombat documentary in 2020 was one of the best Mortal Kombat documentary in the last 20 years. It had over 40 episodes from numerous characters, including Michael J. White and numerous casts like Chris Casamassa, numerous actors that have played leading roles. So we're delighted now to be featuring our third in the big gaming sort of franchise. As we mentioned, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were in the late 80s, early 90s, and Japan and Namco's in terms of their breaking into the industry in terms of the late 90s, in terms of the early PlayStations, was their version of Tekken. And so far, we've spoken to characters who have played in terms of Tekken, who've made voiceover roles in terms of the video games, the numerous sort of Tekken games. We've spoken to people who have appeared in both Tekken movies, the first Tekken movie in 2010, the blockbuster, and in the other Tekken sequel in 2014. But our special guest this evening, he's appeared in the new animated TV series of Tekken. He makes his debut on that, and it's called Tekken Bloodline, and he plays the character Ganryu. He's the one and only Earl Baylon. Earl, pleasure to have you on there with us this evening. And Earl, growing up as a youngster back in the late 80s, sort of early 90s, were you a sort of an arcade sort of guy? Were you a basher of the sort of fingers, sort of pounding your fingers into oblivion, trying to, in terms of the fighting games? And when Tekken came along in the early to mid 90s with its sort of debut on the PlayStation 1 back in then, was it something that you became aware of, and did you sort of try your hand at it?
Well, I've been a gamer pretty much my entire life. I started way, and this makes me kind of dates me, like back on the Atari 2600, playing pole position, tank pong, wow, amongst other things. But so I've been playing since then, and yeah, when fighting games first came on the radar, on the scene, yeah, I did play a few of them. I played primarily, I played a lot of Street Fighter. Because I was kind of the first one of the ones that was available to home consoles back in the day. That came out like on the Super Nintendo, was like a Genesis back then. So I played a lot of that. I remember I never had a PlayStation, so like I missed that kind of like entire generation of games besides Final Fantasy VII. But like I played a little bit of Tekken, like Battle Arena, Toshinden, all that stuff. So yeah, I'm aware of all of them, and I did like play a little bit of everything, but I was never like a real pro at Tekken.
So obviously you come from a big gaming sort of background in terms of that, in terms of your acting. And tell me, you've done numerous sort of work in terms of voiceovers, in terms of animated projects in the sort of past. How did Tekken come about on your radar? How did it come about, the opportunity for you to get involved in Tekken Bloodline in terms of the animated series? And was by chance, or were you sort of sounded out for that sort of role?
Well, it was a little bit of chance, a little bit of a little bit of connections. Like at the time, I had worked on the Tomb Raider series, the Survivor trilogy for the past like decade or so, and the folks that were handling the production of that hit me up one day, and I had kind of taken a break from acting a little bit for a couple of years, and so I didn't get back into voiceover, especially until I started auditioning. I had worked on a project called Trece, which is an anime on on Netflix, and based on the Filipino graphic novel. So I worked on that, and I started working with an agent, a voiceover agent, Dean Pinero Talent, and that's when I got back on the radar. The folks at Philip and Timothy Austin over at Horseless Cowboy. So they're the ones who handled the production of not only the first two Tomb Raider games, but also Tekken. So they hit me
Okay.
up, asked me to send in an audition tape, and they cast me in the project. Yeah, and that's basically how it happened. So a little bit of circumstance, um, a little bit of serendipity.
Yeah, and obviously this character Ganryu, in terms of obviously fighting games, obviously when they're born in sort of fighting games and to start off these sort of characters, they might have their one-liners, they might have their fighting sort of sequence. So it's different, obviously, when it's projected into animated series because now
Right.
this character has to have a background, he has to have a plot, he has to have a story
Absolutely.
with him. So the one-liners in terms of that become they're still very much important how they're emphasized, but a whole sort of life is drawn up for this sort of character. And what was their sort of pitch in terms of what they wanted Ganryu to be in terms of Tekken Bloodline? How did it sort of feel him out to you, or what was the premises and how you want to give life to this sort of character in terms of make him feel more than a thumb basher?
Well, I think what they really told me, because I wasn't aware of a lot of the lore of Tekken. I knew like the basic stuff, Heihachi Mishima and like the devil, Gina,
Brian
all that stuff.
Fury and
Yeah.
yeah.
So I knew a few things. I didn't know how Ganryu like fit into it really. So a bunch of my knowledge of what I know comes from basically the breakdown and the script. They told me, at least in this iteration, he's working as a henchman for Mishima, and basically is the head of his security. So I kind of just built a head canon around that. So I'm thinking he's been working for this company for a long time. Um, Probably like loyal to a fault to not only the company but Heihachi himself. And so when he gets put in the situation where he has to intercept what he sees as a danger to the company, then he's going to do it, right? um but yeah, that's all. A lot of that is headcanon. I was told like what his job was, and uh kind of what he's doing in the scenes that he shows up in. But for the most part, like you do create a lot of background in your head, when
Yeah.
you're doing something like this. So that's just what I did.
Yeah, and Earl, in terms of Tekken Bloodline, the animation series, and obviously you mentioned there about voiceovering a sort of character. Were the drawings, were the cartoons, in terms of the sketches of the characters and peers, was that very sort of important to you in terms of how you would sort of tone your voice, in terms of whether you give him a deep sort of voice, in terms of that, were the cartoon, were the images, the stills, was that very important to you to see those?
So with this project, we actually we recorded this a long time ago. Back in I want to say 2019.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I can take a look at my, yeah, I think 2019 is when
Yeah.
we recorded this. But so there was no art available yet back then.
Okay.
So I didn't know what the version of him in the anime was going to look like. I knew what he looked like from the games, and so I guess that informed kind of like where we went with the voice. But we also worked with him, the voice. I worked with the voice director Phil, in the booth, kind of trying to find his voice, right? So yeah, we end up going down here, and Philip asked me to stay down in this register, the entire time, so that we work together to find a voice, basically. um yeah, that is pretty much it.
And I suppose, Earl, in terms of interactions, in terms of an
Mhm.
animated series, obviously you could be interacting with maybe 1 to 2 different characters at a different time. Obviously,
Mhm.
did you find that in terms of sometimes that you could be on a booth in there pitching your sort of voice, there might be no one else in the booth except for the sound sort of technician in terms of that, and obviously you're having these conversations to say 2 imaginary sort of people at the same time. Is
Right.
that sort of how do you sort of prepare yourself for that? Is there a different task, or do you still talk into the mic at the sort the same way?
Well, it always benefits to be reading across from another person when you're doing something like this. And usually if we're doing because pretty much a lot of voiceover, at least what I've been doing, um has taken place solo in the, it's just us in the booth. Just us by ourselves. And if the voice director gets a take that they like, then or if it's more of a scene where it kind of isn't reliant so much on responding to somebody, then then it's fine and it's not really a problem. But like sometimes just to help us out, the voice director will kind of read the scene through with us, just so it kind of has kind of a life to it, in terms of we're actively responding to something. And I mean, it helps, it absolutely does. I think that I mean, but otherwise, I mean, that's kind of just part of the job, especially when you're doing voiceover, is you have the conversation in your head with yourself basically. And you take that, whatever it is happening in your head and your imagination, and you respond to that. um that mean that was basically the process with this same thing. For a lot of the stuff, I just read the lines. We give like one, 2 or 3 takes of it, and then if we needed something else, or if it's a long scene where there's a lot of exchange going on, then uh, the voice director Phil would kind of read through the scene with me.
And I suppose, Earl, in terms of Tekken now, and in terms of its sort of lifeline, an awful lot of
Mhm.
people are excited to see this animated series because, as you mentioned, it's been 2014 since the sort of last sort of Tekken movie. And Tekken, while it hasn't sort of had the same sort of success in terms of what Mortal Kombat might have had in terms of its movies, it hasn't been an
Right.
abject sort of failure either in terms of like Street Fighter, in terms of the John Claude Van Damme version of Street Fighter movie as well. So where do you think the Tekken sort of franchise can go in terms of movies going forward?
I think something like Tekken has the thing about it is, like, there's not been like a big blockbuster Tekken thing, right? And I think that's kind of a great place for the franchise to go, like a um big like kind of tentpole big special effects, big budget thing. I think that could be definitely a possibility. I know we had that live action a few years ago, um but I'm not sure if that made it to theaters, if I remember correctly. But I'm hoping, I think the fan base is great, and it's like it's large enough to where it would um it would be great, and it would be possible for that to happen. So hopefully that's a place that it goes. um I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the anime. So I mean, it left off in a place where it could possibly go into a second season, but I haven't heard anything about that yet, so hopefully that's another thing that happens.
I suppose Earl being sort of projected now and cast into this Tekken sort of limelight. Obviously, we know every 2 to 3 years, not even 2 to 3 years, nearly every 2 years, there's another installment of a Tekken game coming out. And I just spoke in terms of nowadays these games coming out. It's not all about the fighting. It's almost these games in between sort of segments or chronological movies. As someone once said when we
Mhm.
were doing the Mortal Kombat documentary, if you take out all the fight scenes in Mortal Kombat and you just play the sort of clips, it's over 3 hours and 45 minutes. of
Right,
dialogue
right.
and content in terms of that. So obviously these games are heading in that sort of direction going forward in terms of these
Mhm.
fight games. And do you obviously feel yourself now, having portrayed Ganryu, that if a voiceover opportunities come about to project this character in the Tekken games going forward, is obviously because now you're facilitating this role in this animation series, that's something that you're open to going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to. I had a lot of fun playing the character, and to be able to play something that's part of like such a huge franchise is always really cool. So I mean, I don't know where they're going forward with the games. I know we're like on 8 right now,
Mm.
and but if they keep on going forward with it and they do need somebody to fill that role, I mean, I'd always been down, and I'd appreciate the opportunity.
Mm. And I spoke to one or two character voiceover actors who have been with sort of Tekken from the very first days, from the very first game, all the way up along in terms of that, in terms of this documentary. And I asked them the question in terms of if they got opportunity maybe to voice a character in Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter thing, would they sort of consider it in terms of an opportunity? Is it all about the character and all about the pitch? Or is there that sort of competitive sort of rivalry in terms of being tied to one sort of franchise?
Right.
But obviously, you're just heading into this sort of story as well, so I presume that doesn't come to past you. It's all about the project and the character for you, I imagine.
It is very much about the project and the character. I mean, I think if you asked me when I was much younger, um, I was literally just thinking about this. Back in the day, especially speaking about video games, it was always like one versus the other. It was always Sega versus Nintendo in the '90s, Genesis versus Super Nintendo, even now Xbox versus PS5. And I'm like, I really cared about that kind of stuff back in the day, as a younger person. But now I'm just like, wherever there's a good project, wherever there's like worthwhile art being made, then I'm there for it. So yeah, I'm not like into Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighters versus Tekken is superior or whatever. Soul Calibur for the win. I mean, I played all of them and I like all of them, and each one has their different strengths and different things that they play to, and different kind of quirks. So I mean, um yeah, I'm open to anything, basically. Like you said, where there's a good project, where there's a good story and a good character, then I'm always down for that.
And I suppose, Earl, lastly, before I let you go, you might remind people of all sorts of generations, because obviously an animated series is something which people can watch in terms of family, grandchildren, loved one. We know some
Mhm.
people do like to watch cartoons and do watch the sort of storylines behind cartoons. It can be a nice, relaxing sort of theme as well. You don't need to have your action-packed Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis type
Right.
movies the whole time as well. What's in store for people actually sat down and watched Tekken Bloodline in terms of the animated sort of series, and what's it about really?
So basically it is it's the how do I say this? I guess like the origin story of Jin Kazama, right?
Mm.
It's him, because we start off with his training with his mother, and something bad happens and he has to go find his grandfather, who he finds out is Heihachi Mishima. And of course, Mishima is running this tournament and with fighters all over the world, and hilarity ensues. I'm just kidding, not hilarity. A lot of fighting ensues, and I think the action is great.
Yeah.
Um, the voice acting, of course, not because I'm biased, but like everybody does a great job in the series. I think KG. Uh, I'm blanking on names right now. I know it plays Jin, but uh yeah, it's a fun ride. It's short, it's 6 episodes, so if I remember correctly, yes. uh but fun watch. um Shorter, like regular anime length episodes, so it's quick, and I think it's definitely worth your time.
Worth
Leave
your
a song in the
time.
background if you want. I mean, I don't know. But
And Earl, obviously, worth our time and very much worth our time speaking to you there today. Earl Baylon, thanks for joining us today to give your insight of playing Ganryu in the Tekken Bloodline animated TV series. You're part of the Tekken Bloodline going future. Thanks for sharing your time with us there today, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
All right. Thank you, James. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care, Earl.